You are listening to the podcast Coffee and Resistance Literature, promoting cultural exchange through literature, by the CRENAC Research Project and supported by the American Embassy to celebrate 200 years of diplomatic relations between Brazil and the United States.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast entitled Coffee and Resistance Literature, Promote Cultural Exchange through Literature. My name is Maria Luisa Queiroz. I am graduating in English Language Letters and the Federal University of Pará, and it is an honor to be talking a part in this project. I am with my colleagues Adriele and Naira.
Hello, my name is Naira Costa and I am graduating of the Federal University of Pará in English Language Letters, and I'm very excited to talk to you about this brilliant work.
Hi, I am Adriele Ferreira. I am also a graduate of the Federal University of Pará in English Language Letters. I am really excited to talk to you today about the book, and I hope it is enriching.
Today we are going to discuss the science fiction novel Kindred Bluntines by the author Octavia Butler, known to many as the Lady of Science and Fiction. This is one of her most acclaimed works. Now to start off discussions, Naira, can you tell us a bit about Octavia Butler and her influence on resistance literature?
Certainly, Octavia Butler is recognized as one of the most influential authors in the science fiction genre, particularly for her narrative of resistance. Butler was one of the first black women to attain notoriety in literary space dominated by white men. Her personal trajectory is marked by considerable challenges such as poverty, dyslexia, and resistance, both in academic and in little circles. To paraphrase the author's open inverted commas, I started writing about power because it was something I had very little of, close inverted commas. So, despite the adversity, she is unsilent, her working to explore a complex question of identity, power, and oppressions, addressing themes of resistance with an unique profoundness, bring new perspectives.
Your story is inspiring, no doubt about it. And how did she manage to do that and Kindred? Adriele, could you introduce us to the main elements of the plot?
Well, Kindred was first published in 1979 and remains an extremely relevant work today. It tells the history of Dana, a young black writer from California in the 1970s. In mystery way, she is transported back in time to the south of the United States in 1850. It's worth nothing that 1850 was a period before the War of Section in the USA. At that time, slavery was at its most devastating, which is a problem for her. There was no guarantee of freedom there. Dana discovers that her time travel is connected to Ruth's, one of her white ancestors, and the son of a slave owner family. To answer her own existence, she must protect him while navigating a brutal and oppressive reality.
It's interesting to think about how much these situations put Dana in a dilemma. She needs to protect the one who symbolized the oppression in order to preserve her lineage, while trying to maintain her identity and dignity. Dana is not just a black woman from the 20th century. Being taken back to the past, she ends up being exposed to experience and a historical legacy of struggle and pain in a very visceral way. Time travel allows her to understand what her ancestors faced, which further strengthens her resilience. And the concept of resistance is not something distant. It's almost instinctive for her.
The character is clearly a powerful representation of resistance, both physical and psychological, transported to American slave owners' past. Dana is confronted with the brutality of a system that dehumanizes and subjugates black people, but she refuses to be defined by this reality. Her resistance is manifested in her ability to preserve her identity and humanity, even in the face of violence, fear, and oppression. In addition, Dana embodies the intergenerational struggle by experiencing the pain and trauma of her ancestors, become a living linking between the past and the present. Her enjoying is not just an individual survival, but a way of confronting and challenging the power structures that continue to change in contemporary times, reaffirming the strength and resilience of marginalized voices.
Exactly, the title Kindred, which in its literal translations means kinship or relativity, directly reflects the ancestral connections between the characters from the past and the present. This connection transcends times, but also exposes the paradox of powers, relations that present across generations. Ancestors is both a strength and burden. In Dana's case, she is led to revisiting the histories of her ancestors, directly confront the horrors of slavery. This experience is not only a historical reconstruction, but also an invitation to reflect on how the past shapes our understanding of the present. Octavia reminds that resistance is not just an effort to survival, but an affirmation of our humanity. Her works is a call of us not to forget the struggles that have shaped our society and to continue to question the structures of oppression.
Referring to the power relation between generations mentioned by Nara, Rufus, despite having a certain affection for Dana, still plays the role of oppression. He has been conditioned to decide he was a child by the influence of his environment and also by the violent and abusive relationship he had with his father. An example of this is in the chapter 40, when Rufus tries to set fire to the bedroom curtain, and Dana arrives in the time to stop him and ask him why he did it. So he explains, open inverted commas, because he hit me. Look, he turned around and lifted up his shirt so that I could see the long, red welts crisscrossing his skin. And I saw wound marks, angle scars from at least one much was beaten. He said I took money from his desk, and I said I didn't. He said I was calling him a liar, so at me, closed inverted commas. This expert shows us that this abusive relationship in which his father oppressed him led him to become an oppression in the future. Rufus is a complex character, living tough an internal struggle that refers to the trauma and the continuity of cycle of oppression.
An example of resistance, defying the slave system even under the worst of circumstances. And the book makes this point in an impactful way, such as when she describes the beatings and oppression with such intensity. Naira, do you think this is Butler criticism the way in which the discussion of slavery is neglected to this day?
Absolutely. The stories makes it clear that Dana experience it's not just physical, but physiological, revealing the traumatic way of history that society often ignores. Butler reminds us that these marks don't disappear and need to be remembered.
This resistance address in Kindred reminds me of the 2024 Brazilian film Branco Sai, Preto Fica, by director Adley Queiroz, which translates into English as follows: white out, black in. Its work of science fiction and social denunciation that address the consequences of structural racism in Brazil. The plot takes place in Ceilândia, in the Federal District, and follows two black men survivors of a violent police attack at black music dance in the 1980s. One of them was left paraplegic and the other had a leg amputated. The narrative makes elements of documentary and dystopian fiction while a third character, coming from the future, seeks to gather evidence of the racism and oppression suffered by protagonists for historical reparation, with a plot that reflects the marks of institutional racism and urban segregation. The film highlights the resilience of resistance of marginal community in the face of an oppressive system. Luisa, how do you see this connection?
Em Branco Sai, Preto Fica, as in Kindred, we have characters who suffer from an oppressive and racist system. In the movie, we see a more futuristic and dystopian approach, but which, at the same time, revisits Brazilian historical and social traumas. Both the movie and the book bring this resistance to racism and brutality within its own context.
And not only that, both protagonists face difficulties that require almost superhuman strength to survive in resistance. Whether it's the imposition of slave system in Kindred or policy violence and structural racism in Branco Sai, Preto Fica. This is demonstrate how the struggle for identity and dignity is universal.
The book shows us the daily life of slavery and the protagonist, through time travel, is forced to experience the horrors of slavery firsthand. In the chapter of the fighting, Dana describes, I had see people between on television and the movies we'd see fake blood on their backs and heard well rehearsed screams. But I have not stood close and smelled the sweat or had the players of people humiliated in front of their families and themselves. In light of this, something we can take from this work is the fact that even today the issue of racism and slavery is neglected. And Dana, despite that begging back, had no idea of the standing of the suffering her ancestor had experienced it. This is one of Octavia Butler's major works, which revolutionized science fiction literature by highlight black protagonists and telling stories from the perspective of the oppressed.
Fortress enchanted by the death and strength of Kindred, Blood Ties, it's worth exploring Octavia Butler's other works, which also address issues of resistance, identity, and power. The parable series, Parable of the Sower, and Parable of the Talents presents a dystopian future in which a young black woman struggles to survive in a devastated world while seeking to build a new vision of community and spirituality. The Schnozen's trilogy, Thou Adulthood, Rights, and Imago, uses elements of science fiction to discuss cousins between species, adaptation, and survival in the face of radical change. In all her works, Butler challenges her readers to reflect on social structures, the impact of oppression, and the transformative power of human resilience, consolidating her legacy as one of the most important forces in the world literature.
We would like to thank everyone who listened to us until the end of this episode, and we would also like to thank the USA Embassy for supporting this project and celebrating of the bicentenary anniversary of diplomatic relations between Brazil and the United States. Don't miss this next episode. See you!